But let's get to the gist of today's session. So first, 3 key trends that are on the market. First one is privacy laws, and as you probably this is not just a European or Asian thing. This is all over the world where privacy bills are being introduced or are actually made more strict. And they try to catch up with technology, basically, because like when the last privacy bills in some countries were introduced 20 years ago, there was no concept of tracking users and online profiles, etc. So the technology or biometric technology, digital imaging, processing, AI, and these laws have to catch up. But on the other hand, because these laws weren't implemented earlier, there was a bit of Wild West with data, and a lot of companies had an approach like, okay, let's collect everything, store everything, and we'll see what we do with that next. And basically, there are a lot of examples where this data was simply misused or leaked, etc. Okay. So why is it important? It's important if privacy laws impact is important because in many of them, the online identifier, whether it's cookie or fingerprint or IP address, is considered personal data. And if we deal with personal data, typically in these privacy laws, they are requiring opt-in. So you cannot collect and store this or use this unless you have a consent from the user, which is hard to get. And if you look at the common opt-in rates, there are anywhere from 30 to 70%, which means that you will be losing a lot of data if you can only use opt-in tracking. Another important thing that is often oversaw is that the data collected for one purpose cannot be used for others. So, for example, we collected the email address for signing up for our service, so for our online application, and we want to send an email to the user with marketing newsletter. That's a no-go in case of many of the privacy laws, because the data was collected for one purpose and used for others. So you need also consent in cases like that. And then there is also a notion of how whether the laws are allowed to transfer data from one country to another country. So what's the impact? Typically, on the quality of data, we'll not see the impact because we can still collect high quality data if we comply with privacy laws. But the big impact may be the actual quantity. So we may only track the users that have given us consent in certain cases, which will obviously reduce the data and number of profiles that we'll have data on. Of course, there are some opportunities that are also created by these privacy laws. So if we actually build the trust and direct relation with consumers, they may be eager to share more, and we may be reaching actually the users that care about our brand and our product than pretty much everyone that just visited us once and they never had an intention to buy from us. Okay, going into the technology side, and here we have the third-party cookies blocking, and this has been already introduced by Firefox, Safari, Microsoft Edge, Chrome. Sanan said they supposed to introduce it this year, but that was delayed, and the delay was by the actual backlash of the alternative solution that Google presented. I will talk about that in the next section a bit, which is called FLOC, and I will explain how it works and why there were issues with that. So basically, we have that delayed by almost 2 years, and the third-party cookies are still allowed in Chrome, and they are disabled by default in all other browsers, which have probably like around 30% of the market share. So you still have these third-party cookies only on the 70 or 60 or in some countries 80% that the market share that the Chrome gets.
Maciej, what would help is just to articulate, when you're talking about third-party cookies, what exactly do you mean with an example, for example, so that I think it's clear.
Sure. So third-party cookies are primarily used for remarketing and building the profiles of the users. And the big difference between first-party and third-party cookies is that the third-party cookie can track the user across different websites. So if I visit, let's say, New York Times website and then TechCrunch website, with third-party cookie, the ad tech platform can see which pages I visited on both sides and that I am a single user. With first-party cookies, what's allowed is only track within given websites. So analytics technologists, for example, typically use first-party cookies, and that changes does not affect that. And but you can only track the user within the website. If I go to different website, I'm no longer recognized when the first-party cookie is set on my browser. Similar changes are happening on the mobile. So previously, both on Android and Apple, there was a mechanism where you can track the users across different apps. So if I use play one game and then I switch to another, the ad tech platform can track how I used each of these applications, which is very valuable because then they may, for example, cross-sell me different products in the applications. And that has been so far available for both platforms. But Apple recently has changed that to opt-in. So I have to allow the app to be tracked. And there is even a report that how many users actually do that. And only 20% of users opt in. With Android, there are some plans to limit this ad tracking policies, but they haven't been introduced yet. I saw that someone that raised hand, so perhaps.
Yeah, Suresh, go ahead. Suresh, you had a question?
Yeah, hi, Maciej. So I had a question in the sense we are talking about cookies, but most of our sites, they use login with Facebook ID or login with Gmail or login with Google, right? If we go to a new app or if any new registration, it asks this login with this. So is it not in that way? Is that also one example of a cookie?
So login with Google itself not, but actually the way it works is Google can recognize that you visited this app because this widget loads. But having this login with Google or login with Facebook actually passes to the website also the email address in most cases, because some apps does not ask for that. So this new identifier that is used instead of cookie is email, and email is one of the ways that some of the app developers and publishers are envisioning the future without cookies, because it's stable, it's related to the one user, it does not change typically, and it works across the platform. So that's why they implemented this login with. But actually this login with Facebook, Google mechanism is to make the life of the user simpler, and what the publisher is looking for is your email.
So fundamentally, it is a bit of it's a part. Is it a part solution to the loss of the cookie? Is that how we should look at?
Yeah, you should look at this. This is a part of the solution, but for some apps and publishers, this would work. But there is still a lot of, especially news websites or some more generic websites that lose a lot of audience if they do if they block access to the content without logging in first. So this will work, but only for part of the market, and we won't force the users to log in on every single website that they visit, because that would be too much simply for users, and you will be losing audience because of that.
Okay,
Okay, so
Yeah.
Sorry, this is Ranjita here. I just wanted to ask, so does that mean that your Facebook login will discontinue over a period of time, which is mandatory now?
Why do you think it's mandatory? Because it's not mandatory. I mean, maybe it's mandatory on some websites, but there are still a lot of websites that does not require this login from you. I don't think it will disappear. What I'm saying is that for part of the app developers or publishers, it will work, but there will be still parts that will not implement and not force the user to log in to access the content or the app.
Okay. Thank you.
So if I may, Ranjita, I think there are sites which ask you for both. So either they ask you to log in and they give you an alternative of logging in with your email ID, right?
Email ID, right.
So I think they give you both the options, and depending upon the user, I guess they choose what is simpler sometimes, but eventually on many websites, consumers will stop visiting the website if every time they are asked to give their email ID, or it starts becoming a must have to actually enter the website, right? Because sometimes once you log in, you can stay logged in. But
Right.
if you log in with your Facebook ID, you cannot stay logged in sometimes. You have to keep logging in every time you come back. And that could be an issue. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
exactly. So there is a bit more to this limits of tracking, but in general, the trend is that both browsers and device vendors are introducing privacy protection mechanisms, and this will impact data quality, maybe in some cases data quantity. And by quality, I mean what we can track about the user, and by quantity, I mean how many users we will be able to track. So it doesn't have that much impact as privacy laws, but still is something that we have to keep in mind. Especially phasing out third-party cookies makes it much more difficult for some companies in the space to operate. The third trend is a bit of like social one. Consumers are becoming less, they have less trust towards the brands and how much data they want to share. And I don't think they have less trust, they are simply became more aware about that. I haven't found a report for India or Asia, but I found 2 reports for EU and US, and I believe that similar trend is happening on the Indian and Asian markets. So for example, in the EU, 41% residents said that they don't want to share personal data with private companies. And in the US, it was even more extreme, which is funny because they are much more relaxed in context of sharing data. That 69% think that companies will use their data that they in a ways that they wouldn't be comfortable with. And I think the best way to illustrate this trust crisis is actually that more and more users are installing ad blocking or privacy protection extensions that will basically block ads as well as trackers from loading. And this depends on the device and the region. So for example, in APAC region, we have 40% of the desktop devices, but only 18% of mobile tablet devices. In general, these are very large numbers. So if you think that you cannot reach this user or you don't have data on them, at least some platforms does not have them, that justifies that some companies are actually trying to implement anti-ad block solution, which will ask the user to disable the ad blocker to access the content. And this is like vicious cycle with that. But this has had profound effects on the market. Typically, you can assume that you don't see 15 to 35% of the audience because of this ad blocking and privacy protecting extensions like AdBlock Plus or privacy aware, etc. They were intended in the first place to block displaying the ads, but actually there are more and more extensions like Ghost Array that are focusing only on preventing the data about the user being collected on the website. And this is like a problem, but also opportunity again for the brands to choose some more privacy-friendly technologies that the consumers will be more comfortable with. And I will I know that there were some questions asked about in this section. Before I move to the next section, I wanted to give a space for maybe quick 1-2 more questions about that, and then we'll continue with the topic number 2 about the first party data.
I think there was one question that was asked that fundamentally, if consumers do install ad blockers, then for example, even if they visit a platform like Amazon, and let's say they look at products, then will those ads stop chasing them across the internet as they move to other platforms? Is that what will happen with ad blockers?
That will actually be the case, but it's important in case of Amazon is a great example of also some sort of walled garden ecosystems that we'll cover in section 3, that Amazon will still know about what products they clicked and what they like bought or what they viewed. So within Amazon ecosystem, this data will stay, and the ad block will not help with that, because this is a first-party data collected by Amazon, and that's actually something that is not blocked by the ad blockers or this privacy protection extensions.
But Amazon will not be able to chase you on other platforms where you go there.
Yes and no.
Okay.
Because yes, using the standard third-party tracking mechanisms, yes, but also Amazon owns some properties, and they may be able to reach to match you, for example, by email address. If you were signed into Amazon and to some other platform owned by Amazon, they may use that to chase you there. So there is a technical chance to do it, but it's probably small and only very rare cases where they would actually do that.
Okay, awesome. Anybody else across the board?
Yeah, hi, Anushri. Can I ask a question, please?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, so this is from pure publication side. What also happens is all publications in India, they run their newsletters, right? Which provides users with news, say a weekly or a daily newsletter. But when a user signs up, she typically signs up to consume news and not to consume marketing content. But because India as a country still lacks a data protection law, which hasn't been tabled yet, publications have this weird way of using the same data to drive marketing communication. So do you think it's mandatory for us or the publications to start taking consent, because it can get flagged off? And there is a gray area being utilized, which says, how do you define your newsletter? You could clearly say I'm communicating content through the newsletter. So how, I mean, is it right to continuously use that gray nomenclature for such kind of interactions?
So I think with that's a very interesting case, because I think a user signing up newsletter, they sign up to receive this newsletter, and that's implies a consent for receiving the news, and they can reasonably expect that in this newsletter you may have some paid promotion. What I would say is not acceptable, and that would be not acceptable under, for example, European law, and maybe also by the new India law, is that if I share this email with other company for them doing the email marketing. Because that's like selling my personal data to other company. But as long as I do it and it's in a form of newsletter, I think you are covered, and that won't change. Like I cannot think of how they would have to change the law to prevent some paid advertising in the newsletters.
Awesome. Ranjita, you had a question?
Yeah. So I wanted to ask how have the tech and ad tech companies transformed, who were basically monetizing and whose revenue model were based on selling third-party data? So, I mean, say for example, even Google, a lot was dependent on third-party data for them as well, right? I mean, coming from a publisher side, all of their products which we use, they are collecting more data than what we have today. So what are the changes happening in the ecosystem? If you could briefly tell me, please.
Sure. Maybe Google isn't the best example because they have so much business in search advertising and contextual advertising, which still works. But a better example where companies have to change completely the business model are data management platforms. So think of Lotami, Bluekai, and this type of brands that provided just the data for buying advertising. And the trend that we see is that the data management platforms transform into customer data platforms. And the real difference is that in the model before, they were collecting data from, for example, publishers. They were paying them some revenue share and selling this data to advertisers to buy ads. With customer data platforms, what they are doing is that they are collecting this data on behalf of publisher or a brand, and they make it available only to them rather than reselling. So they do not sell data, but they sell a software platform for publishers or for brands. And that's how some of this DMPs transforms into the customer data platforms.
So basically, sorry, what I want to ask is that, so basically, instead of investing in your own DMP platform, the tech bit or the digital transformation bit can be outsourced to another company. What's Adobe is doing, I think, a lot.
So that's one part of that. The other way we see the market is also transforming is a bit of coming back to the contextual advertising methods, because that still works, that's still compliant, that's not affected by any demise of third-party cookies, etc. And that's still better than having no data.